All right. Hello, everyone who's here. Let's see, share screen. Right.
Hello.
Hello. There
How's
we
it
go.
going?
Good, good. How are all of you doing?
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Doing great.
Awesome. I think we'll
I
just
found the
wait.
reading
Oh,
so interesting.
it's very interesting. I like the last sort of section of the chapter, which is what we'll be covering today, of course. What time is it? Oh, it's time to start. Okay, let me see. I just have a message on my Discord server. Actually, no, I don't. Okay, let's just see if there's anyone else in the waiting room. Does not seem to be, but we will admit other people as they appear. Oh, such as Robin, who is in the waiting room now. There we go. Okay, so I figure I'll just try and carry on from where we left off last time in the same manner that we were actually carrying on with the lecture last time. So, we'll do a little bit of recap and then just cover the last couple sections of the chapter. I don't know if this lecture is going to go quite as long as last time, but that's okay. We're getting near the end of the week. And, I'm sure there would be some people who would be, not displeased about a slightly shorter lecture. So without further ado. Oh, before I get started, I'm just curious, is there anyone here who was not able to be here last time? Doesn't appear so. Okay, well, just in case, the first lecture, or not the first lecture, but the first lecture of this week is on my YouTube channel now. I had a little bit of trouble uploading it to Brightspace. I'm not really sure what the problem was, but in any case, the advantage of this is that even for those who are able to make it for the synchronous lectures, if you want to, you can always easily review what we've covered simply by watching those videos, which I'm reposting on my YouTube channel. I'll share a link to that if anyone's interested, but don't feel like you have to subscribe or anything. It's not like a real channel. It's just a teaching platform. So anyway, I don't know how many of you will find that helpful, but in case any of you do, it is available for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, of course. We've got a few more participants rolling in, but I'm just going to minimize this so that everyone can see the slides. And we'll get started. So, as I've already mentioned, I want to cover the section Emotions Within the Affective Domain and the conclusion of Chapter 1. And these are both quite short. Remember last time, we talked a lot about phenomenology, intentionality, and epistemology, and how we can use the particular characteristics that emotions have, phenomenological, epistemological, and intentional, to distinguish them from other psychological or affective states. That's kind of what the authors continue on doing in this last bit, but they go on to differentiate between other affective states. So they don't so much focus on mental states like beliefs or perceptions this time. What they do instead is focus on the difference between emotions on the one hand and emotional dispositions and sentiments and character traits, which may or may not exist, by the way. So that's what they do in the remainder of the chapter. But just to recap, because it's always a wise idea to recap, last time, of course, we spent a good deal of time talking about the fact that emotions have particular phenomenological characteristics, particular intentional characteristics, and there are certain interesting epistemological aspects to emotions. And all of these features are particular to emotions and not particular to those other mental, psychological, behavioral, affective, whatever you want to call them, those other states. So just to go over it very briefly, we talked at length about phenomenology, appearance in the world, right? But of course, what we mean by phenomenology in this context is that there is something that it's like to have an emotion. Usually we talk about this in terms of what the emotion feels like. The feeling of getting goosebumps if you're frightened is different than feeling rage boil inside you, which is of course different from feeling disgusted, where you might feel your stomach turn, right? So there's a feeling side to phenomenology, but there's also a hedonic tone. Hedonic is, of course, that comes from hedone, or pleasure. So when we talk about hedonic tone, we're talking about whether an emotion is pleasant or not pleasant or unpleasant, whatever, right? So that's one thing we can focus on to understand how the emotions are actually different from other psychological states. Emotions have a particular phenomenology to them, which is different from, say, moods, right? And there's, of course, intentionality. Remember, intentionality in philosophy means aboutness, or that something has content, or that it is directed at a particular object. And emotions are about particular objects. Particular objects here being a technical term that Deonna and Teroni use to refer to whatever your emotion is directed at: events, people, states of affairs, and so forth. And the particular objects of our emotion and our emotions themselves are always grounded in other mental states. And these the authors call oh yes, I also can hear clicking. That's okay, it's not bothering me, but there is some clicking. Anyway, emotions are about particular objects. They are grounded, though. These particular objects are grounded in other mental states. Don't worry, no worries, whoever was click-clacking away with no big deal. Emotions are grounded in other mental states or cognitive bases, and these are other mental states. Here means beliefs, desires, things like this. I guess what we would call or generally characterize as other propositional attitudes. And by the way, before I go on with this recap, since I think we have the time for it, I didn't really talk about propositional attitudes last time. And I'm curious, can anyone here explain to me what philosophers mean when they talk about propositional attitudes?
Are you talking about the difference between like nominal and propositional? Because we did discuss that.
We did discuss referring or the objects of emotion can be nominal or propositional. Like if I'm afraid that it'll rain, that's propositional. And if I'm afraid of the dog, that's nominal. But a
Right.
propositional attitude is a little bit different, right? A propositional attitude is actually an attitude that we adopt toward a proposition. So propositions are statements about the world, right? That can be true or false. So it is raining is a proposition. If I believe it is raining, philosophers typically like to cash this out in terms of a propositional attitude. My belief is an attitude I'm taking toward that sentence, that proposition. It is raining. If I believe that it is raining, I have a propositional attitude, namely belief, right? So propositional attitudes are a way to describe mental states as attitudes that we adopt toward propositions, like Josh believes that it is raining, or Sarah desires that dinner be prepared sooner rather than later, or something like that, right? So does everybody follow me there about propositional attitudes?
So it's like any ordinate clause, like
yeah, generally
that begins with like I believe that or I fear that.
Yeah, pretty much. When we describe anything like that, we're describing it propositionally. And if I'm talking about a mental state, then we've got a propositional attitude, right? So this is all just by way of saying that there are various ways that you're probably going to hear about mental states being discussed. So it's just good to be aware of what a propositional attitude is. So there's a question in the chat here from Narmeen, who is asking about the difference between that and nominal. Well, a proposition is a statement about the world, but something that's nominal is something that names a thing, right? So like the dog, right? That would be nominal. If I'm afraid of the dog, that's not really a propositional way of describing my fear, right? The object of my fear is nominal. It's the dog. Okay, good. That seems to clear things up. Excellent. So I'll go back to the slide here. Epistemology, and this is a big one that we'll bump into again later today when talking about desire. Emotions have standards of justification and correctness. So we can talk about our emotions the same way that we can talk about beliefs, in that they both have this mind to world direction of fit. Our emotions, what they're supposed to do, if they're correct, and this is the same for beliefs for that matter, is to be correct, they must meet some kind of standard of evidence, right? If I believe that it is raining, my belief is only true if, in fact, it is raining when I make that utterance that I believe that it's raining, right? And there's also justification, which is like, I have to have some reason. What is my evidence, right? There is a standard of correctness, but what is my justification? For the statement, I believe, or Josh believes it is raining, to reflect, a true belief, it has to actually be raining. But I can have a true belief without justification, right? My justification would be perhaps looking out of a window and seeing that it's raining. If I were to say, I believe it's raining with no justification, and it just happened to be raining, I would be correct, but I wouldn't have any justification. There's a similar thing we can do with emotions, and that was what my example was of taking the dog to the vet. And my feeling relief from hearing the dog is going to be okay. If I hear this from the vet, or say the vet's receptionist, then I have reliable testimony, and my emotion is not only correct because it's proper to feel relief upon hearing that good news, but it's also justified. Whereas if I hear it from some random stranger who doesn't know anything about the situation, and I believe him nonetheless, well, my belief is correct, or my emotional reaction is correct, but it's not justified, right? So these are all the characteristics that we've discussed so far that can help us to distinguish between emotions and things like moods and other psychological states, such as beliefs and perceptions. But now we've got to move on and ask what we can learn by paying attention to these characteristics and also to ordinary language, and how we can bring that to bear on further distinguishing between emotions and other psychological or affective states. So before we do that, I'm just curious. I like to stop periodically and ask if there are any questions, as you've no doubt noticed. And I'm just curious if anyone has any questions thus far about anything that we've recapped. Does not seem to be anything. So far, so good. Okay. Still people showing up, though. That's good. If anyone, there are some people who are just arriving, by the way. And I said before we got started that the lectures that are being recorded, like I'm streaming this, but I'm also recording it, and I'm posting those to my YouTube channel. I'll share a link to that so that you can go, and if you've missed anything, like the beginning of the lecture, you can just go and watch it there. Or of course, if you're not able to make these synchronous lectures, you can just watch them on the YouTube. The YouTube makes me sound old. Are we going to get into more discussion about objectivity and subjectivity? Yes, I think so. I don't know that we'll be doing this today, but this must occur somewhere in the book. And I would be very surprised if it didn't, because, emotions are, of course, very subjective experiences, right? There are things that individuals have, but what we're trying to do here is, literally objectively study emotions, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So
I just can't speak to it yet, but I was just curious as we move through this. I'm just going to keep that in mind. I'm like, it feels like it's important, but it's not exactly what we're not explicitly discussing it in the moment. So
it's
cool.
probably best to keep it in mind as a running theme throughout the course, right? And not just this course, but any kind of class that you may be taking that has to do with the mind, philosophy of mind, psychology, cognitive science, anything that looks at like the emotions or consciousness or perception. We got to keep in mind, I mean, this is cutting at some pretty big mysteries when we're studying anything that we can look at either objectively or subjectively. So all right, so let's see if we can distinguish between the emotions and other affective states. Well, thank you. You're welcome. What am I doing? I can't multitask. Okay. All right. So we want to make some distinctions between emotions and other affective states. Here's a distinction that we can start to make right here. This is what they kick off this section with. We can make a distinction between emotions, which are episodic, and things which might seem like emotions, but which are really more dispositional. So the example statement in the textbook is Leonard is angry with Nina. If Leonard is angry with Nina at a particular moment, if his anger is occurrent, say Nina does something to upset Leonard and he becomes angry with her, then that's an emotion because it is episodic, right? Emotions are episodic, of course. This is one of the things that differentiates them from moods. But we can also have emotional experiences that we might characterize as dispositional. A statement like Leonard is angry with Nina, if it is describing something dispositional in Leonard, like that he is disposed to be angry with her just when she's around, but he's not thinking about her all the time and angry with her all the time, we would not characterize that as an emotion in and of itself, but as an affective disposition, right? So there are different ways we can understand sentences like Leonard is angry with Nina. Is he angry, like undergoing an episode of anger, having an actual emotional reaction? Or is he disposed to be angry with Nina? A good way of, or maybe not a good way, but my example of an affective disposition to do with anger might be something like when I see something about I don't know, pseudoscience in the public discourse, right? Could be the Flat Earth Society. It could be COVID-19 misinformation. I don't know. But I feel like I have an affective disposition to get kind of angry when I see that kind of thing come up in the news or on social media, right? Isabella says astronomy. Astronomy or astrology.
Oh, wait, I meant astrology.
Astrology. I thought that's what you meant. Yes.
Well,
That's so good.
Yeah.
see, that's why I get so confused because of computer science. I mix them up.
That's okay. I figured you probably meant astrology.
Yes.
Another.
Like, your Aries is rising and your Virgo is your. I'm like, what does this all mean? Like.
Well, nothing actually.
Yeah.
I just came off of teaching a class on the paranormal and the not to plug myself, but I do have a lecture on astrology. But the problem with astrology is that even if it worked, the astrological systems that we use in the West, the zodiacs, the horoscope signs and so on, are actually off by one whole sign because of the axis precession of the Earth, right? The Earth tilts on its axis like this every 23,000 years. So if you're not really, like I'm supposed to be a Virgo, or am I? Well, no. The stars have moved around over thousands of years, and I'm technically a Sagittarius if you're actually going by what's actually in the sky. But there are lots of other problems with astrology too. So that's why I get kind of frustrated. So I could say I have a dispositional anger or frustration towards pseudoscience, such as astrology. Bosma watched my lecture on supernatural beings. Yeah, I think that was a quick one, but I don't know. This is all on my YouTube channel, by the way. I really don't mean to plug myself, but if you're curious on what kind of things to take in the future, I do like to teach this philosophy of the paranormal class. So perhaps some of you would find it interesting. Someone made a great point. You can't fix stupid. James, yes, I suppose so. That is one way to put it. Maybe that's what we tell ourselves when we get angry or frustrated with misinformation. Well, we can't fix stupid, right? Maybe not. You might be right there, James. So anyway, that's something you can all check out if you're interested. So there are affective dispositions like this. Some emotional phenomena, like the emotions themselves, can certainly be described and understood in episodic terms. Other emotional phenomena, like what we've just been talking about, are maybe not emotions in their own right or emotional episodes, but they are affective dispositions. And that's a different thing, right? But we can draw further distinctions. But before we do that, Chelsea's raised her hand. How do I?
I lowered it. It's okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you guys can just speak if you wish too. That's fine.
I didn't want to do that. But when I was reading today, specifically in the part where they do talk about desires and stuff later at the end of the chapter, talking about how the dispositions are more enduring over time as opposed to just the isolated episodic experiences of emotion.
Right.
Contrasting that to mood, because mood doesn't necessarily have to have the intentional content, is that where that contrast is, because they're both enduring over time? Or is it just like how we're, because there is a distinction there. We can see that. I don't know how to really word that question.
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
A mood, I would say that how we could differentiate between an emotional disposition and a mood is probably via their differing phenomenality, right? So
okay.
If I have an emotional disposition, I don't know why I'm going with the anger example, but another one would be during the Trump administration, whenever Donald Trump would appear in the news, I'd just be like, you know. So I guess I had like an emotional disposition to rage at Donald Trump for whatever reason.
Sure.
Now, it's not like because I have this disposition, I'm grumpy or angry about Donald Trump being president all the time, right? But if I'm in a mood, if I'm grumpy or depressed, that mood colors my whole day, right? So,
Okay.
so if I have a disposition to become angry when Donald Trump is on the television, I cease to be angry shortly after I have turned the television off. But if I'm grumpy or depressed, I'm just kind of grumpy and depressed all the time for as long as the mood lasts, right?
Okay.
That's how I would differentiate the two.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. All right. So there are further ways that we can distinguish between various emotional phenomena within the affective domain. And we've already distinguished, between emotions and affective dispositions. But we can further distinguish affective dispositions. There are perhaps, 2 or 3 different kinds of affective dispositions that we can have. For example, we can have single track affective dispositions, and these concern a single emotion, or we can have multi-track dispositions, which of course concern multiple emotions. A single track example might be, captured nicely by the statement, Josh is angry about climate change, or Sarah is hopeful about a promotion. These attribute single track dispositions, or in this case, single track, perhaps emotional experiences, because they only evolve the one emotion, right? And emotional dispositions are the name that the authors give to single track affective dispositions. So I know that the terminology is starting to get a little confusing, but we have affective dispositions, which are different than emotional, like episodic emotions. But we have single track affective dispositions, which we call emotional dispositions. They involve only a single emotion. Multi-track dispositions, on the other hand, might involve multiple emotions. The example sentence for this in the book is Juliet loves Romeo. I suppose they assume that undergrads are still reading that. I don't know. Are you? I read that in high school.
I read that in grade 9.
Right? Grade 9, read it in high school. I didn't like it very much.
It sucks.
It kind of sucks. I like Macbeth.
Yeah.
Macbeth,
Yes, Macbeth is where it's at.
Macbeth rules.
Yeah.
Exactly. That was so good.
Yeah.
I remember that was grade 12 English, but we watched the film. There's a film where Mel Gibson plays Macbeth, and it's
what?
It's weird. Yeah, it's weird. Just
oh my god,
to see Mel Gibson as Macbeth.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah,
oh my god.
Especially after all the craziness, all the Mel Gibson stuff that's happened.
Wow.
I would age like milk, probably. Yeah, or cheese. Watch it for the cheese.
That pulls me back to the the cringe video you told us to watch. I actually went and watched it.
Oh, good.
And I feel like this is similarly another cringe thing that would now be considered potentially cringe.
Absolutely. And cringe, if we have time to do some kind of special topic thing, cringe would be a really cool emotion to talk about, because it's a complex emotion, or it seems to be a complex emotion, right?
So if it's I'm going to ask a question about that in a second. I can wait.
No, go ahead now while we're on the cringe train.
The complex emotion, that's different than a multi-track disposition, right? Because the complex emotion, that's not necessarily enduring. So
I would say exactly.
Yet another...
Exactly.
Okay.
But complex emotions might be complex because of the way they recruit, the breadth of the mental bases that they recruit, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And just on the note of cringe, I'm actually not aware of that much scholarship on cringe. There is, however, a YouTuber
Oh,
who
well,
has done a very interesting study on it. And I will make this video available at some point, maybe in my Discord server, if y'all are curious. But yeah,
that's really cool. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
interesting. No problem. So Juliet loves Romeo, to get back on track, attributes multiple emotions. We could cash out Romeo's, or rather Juliet's love for Romeo in terms of affection, infatuation, admiration, but her love for Romeo also means that should the inevitable consequences come to pass and Romeo dies, spoiler alert, she will feel grief. Now, it's of course been a while since I've read Romeo and Juliet. I can't remember if Romeo dies first and then Juliet kills herself and then Romeo kills himself, or the other way around. But it's Shakespearean, right? It is like that, Chelsea says here in the chat. Okay, I guess I did remember it. Huh, weird. I didn't think that would stick with me after all these years, but there you go. So Shakespearean tragedy, inevitable consequences are impending. Romeo dies, Juliet feels grief, and so much grief that she takes her life too. Or jealousy. Should Romeo fancy some other young lady, Juliet would surely feel jealousy. Jealousy, of course, is an emotion that we often do not characterize correctly. Jealousy is a fear of losing the affection of someone you care about. We often misuse the word jealousy when what we should be using is envy. If I say, I'm jealous of your car, well, no, I'm not. I don't have your car, and I'm not afraid of losing it. I'm envious of your car. So, can't the same occur with the climate change example? Oh, you mean that my anger toward climate change might be a multi-track disposition? Is that what you mean? Who asked that question? Cameron, is that what you mean by that question? Lead to disgust or sadness. In that way, yes, I suppose you're right. Depending on what my emotional experience actually is, if I'm angry about climate change and I have a multi-track disposition, so that I'm disposed to become angry when I hear about a climate disaster like a drought or a hurricane, and then perhaps I feel sad or even disgusted, like a moral disgust at the state of the planet. Then I would say that yes, exactly, it could be that sort of thing. And if it were that kind of thing, like the example of Romeo and Juliet, then we would call it a sentiment. So there are single track affective dispositions. These are emotional dispositions, and there are multi-track emotional dispositions, which we call sentiments. So that is how Deonna and Teroni cash this out. But there are other multi-track dispositions too, right? Sentiments, being multi-track affective dispositions, have a particular object, right? Remember, particular object is that's the object of our emotional experience. That's what gives it its intentionality, right? But some multi-track dispositions aren't about particular, or really any particular object. They could be about any object, so long as that object is evaluated in the relevant sort of light. Okay, so Cameron asks in the chat, is the Romeo example considered multi-track because of how broad love is as an emotion? I would say probably yes, because at least when I read books and papers on the emotions, whenever somebody wants to come up with an example of what we might call a complex emotion, they choose love, right? Because who the hell understands love? Simple emotions are things like the universal emotions that are common to all cultures. Sadness, fear, disgust, surprise, anger, happiness. There are 6 of them. These are basic. And their characteristics are quite straightforward. But romantic love is a whole different thing. But there are other complex emotions too, like Schadenfreude, that joy you take at someone else's misfortune. Maybe Schadenfreude explains cringe to a certain extent. I don't know. In any case, more in the chat. I'll just check here. Ennui, yes, existential ennui. Has anyone ever felt a sense of ennui? Oh yeah, yes. What is it?
Sorry, what does that mean?
What does ennui mean? Ennui is like, oh geez, has anyone taken any existentialist classes and read any existentialist philosophies? Yes,
it was pretty common to feel, I think, during COVID, especially.
Yes. So ennui is like a fatigue, a boredom, you're tired of it all, French existentialist film, uninspired, nothing means anything in life, and it's all black and white, right? Although ennui might be a mood. That's something we have to keep in mind here. Nietzsche fixed my ennui. Yes. Nietzsche doesn't want you to experience ennui. Nietzsche probably would have talked about angst instead. Angst is just German for anxiety. We talk about angsty teenagers and stuff nowadays, but existential angst is like life sucks and then you die. How do we find meaning when life is so crappy and we're just going to die? Nietzsche wants us to avoid ennui and angst and nihilism, right? So, and Chelsea, you're right, by the way, in the chat here, this versus anxiety. Yes. You mean Nietzsche versus anxiety or ennui versus anxiety? But in any case, whatever it is you mean, I'm sure there's something there. Oh, that was fun.
Specifically ennui versus anxiety, just
Like
because of how you've talked about how anxiety is one of those things where
anxiety is I bring up anxiety a lot. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, that's true. So maybe ennui could be an emotion and a mood. Yeah, I think there might be something to that. This, by the way, is the kind of thing I want you to do for the critical responses in this class. Questions like this and following them up with some analysis, like, oh, what is ennui? Is it like anxiety or angst or something like that? This is exactly the kind of thing I want to have you all do in the critical responses. So nice example, and hopefully we will generate more as we go. And if you're taking notes, write them down. And if any of them are compelling, then write a critical response about it. It'll be interesting. Okay, let's keep going, because I don't want to fall too far behind here. Okay, sentiments have a particular object. Some multi-track positions aren't about any particular thing, but they're about things that are evaluated in the right light, or maybe, hit the correct category, right? Our first response assignment, I can't remember when, but I will probably talk about it before Okay, Robin says it's due the 24th. So yeah, I'd probably do the 24th. What day is it today? We're on the 16th. Okay, so I will. You know what I could do is I could just make a brief YouTube video explaining the critical response and just upload it to the channel, and you can just watch it. And it'll be like a little quick 10-15 minute how-to video where I explain the assignment and the requirements and so forth. Okay. Yeah, hopefully that answers everyone's questions about that. So an example of a multi-track disposition that isn't about any object in particular, but it's about objects that are evaluated in the right light. So we're talking things like honesty, generosity, charity, maybe things that we might characterize as virtues, or on the flip side, vices like frivolity. You know, if you take like an honest person, for example, an honest person, he or she is going to be sensitive to the value of honesty. So it's not like there's any particular object out there that's tickling that multi-track disposition. Rather, there are characteristics or properties which, when we evaluate certain objects in that light, they might become an object of that multi-track disposition. So an honest person is just going to value honesty, and a particular person might fit that criterion. A kind person is going to be sensitive to the disvalue of suffering, for example, right? So a kind person is going to recognize when he or she can mitigate suffering, alleviate suffering, and be kind, right? That's true. I mean, multi-track dispositions can change. So just in the chat, Robin pointed out that, oh no, I've gone back to the beginning of the chat. Yes, I wouldn't say they were episodic, but you can change. Your multi-track dispositions can certainly change over time. But while you have those dispositions, they aren't really episodic in the same way as emotions are, right? Like you can be generous, maybe when you're young, you're generous. I remember when I first moved to Ottawa, I would often give, I don't know if this is properly generous or not, but while I was waiting for the bus, because I lived over in Gatineau and I had to take the 2 buses, and that was fun. I would often be asked for change by people who were experiencing homelessness, right? And I would give some change, right? That was in my young grad school days. And now really quickly, I learned that if I gave some money to everybody who asked, I wouldn't have any change to get home on the bus. And also, I began to notice that maybe the money wasn't going to food. You know, it was going to something else that wasn't good. Maybe some kind of, maybe I'm feeding somebody's addiction, right? So I changed it. I changed my approach. I'd be polite and say, no, I'm sorry, I don't have anything, but I can give you a cigarette or buy you a hamburger or something like that, right? So it changed a bit. So I would say, yeah. I wouldn't say, yeah, Cameron makes a good way of carving this up here in the chat. There are acts of generosity which are episodic, but being a generous person is an affective disposition of the multi-track kind with no particular object, right? And the point here that I'm trying to get to is just that these things are called character traits in the philosophical tradition. These are character traits, and the authors adopt that nomenclature as well. So Chelsea says in the chat, this could be really interesting, a thing from a psych perspective too, because we could look at trait measurement and scoring on these scales of something like kindness and honesty. If someone scored substantially higher on kindness but lower on honesty, this may interact with how they navigate different situations and play in. Yes, and these kinds of studies, by the way, are what give us cause to question whether character traits actually exist, right? I mean, character traits are important in philosophy. If we're talking about like, let me just see. No, that's an excellent point. That really is. This is kind of a problem that psychology, behavioral psychology, and also moral psychology in recent years. This is a problem that it has raised for schools of thought such as virtue ethics, right? Virtue ethics goes all the way back to Aristotle, and it's all about, phronesis and practical wisdom and determining the good ends and how to achieve them and blah 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 blah, right? And Aristotle, he's all like, yeah, mankind, rational animals, character traits are rah, 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 rah. But do we really have character traits? Oh, you were just discussing this today. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So this is a problem that that philosophers who want to say that there are long-standing dispositions and character traits are supposed to be long-standing, right? They're not just habits that we have. They're supposed to be like deeply ingrained, long-standing dispositions to act in certain ways. And good people, if you're a virtue ethicist, good people are the ones who cultivate these virtues. And bad people or morally neutral people, they don't care. But is there even any such thing as these character traits? The evidence from psychology is not favorable in terms of the existence of such character traits. So yes, okay, that's perfect. And so in a personality class, personality psychology, I imagine we would, well, probably more so than behavioral psychology, would reveal that there are problems with how we understand and define character traits. So that's a good thing to be aware of as well as we proceed through the class, definitely. So everyone try and keep that in mind. Character traits might not be a thing. So, okay, where are we so far? Well, we've talked about different kinds of affective dispositions. We've talked about emotional dispositions, which are single track affective dispositions with a particular object. Then we've got sentiments, which are multi-track affective dispositions with a particular object. And then we have character traits, which maybe not a thing. But they are believed to be multi-track affective dispositions with no particular object. So that's where we are now. Are there any questions before we continue? Okay, so we'll carry on then. Now, all of these affective dispositions do share something in common with emotions, and that is, of course, intentionality, right? They are all about something. Even character traits, which are not about particular objects, still become about objects in the right evaluative light, right? So all these different affective dispositions are directed at something. But affective dispositions also, on the other hand, differ from emotions in terms of their phenomenal character. And that's because, as we've already talked about, there's something that it's like to have an emotional episode, right? There's something that it's like, there's something that it feels like in particular. Affective dispositions, on the other hand, the authors argue, are not like emotions in this way. They say that they don't really have a felt quality themselves, except for the moments when our different affective dispositions actually find expressions via emotional experiences, right? And it's also claimed that they are properties of the individual and they last longer than emotions and moods. Maybe, I don't know if I want to commit to that, because I just spent the last 10 minutes telling you that character traits might not be a thing. And if they're not, well, they certainly can't last longer than moods. Ah, okay. I see. I understand the context of your question then. Yeah. Yeah. So we can differentiate them phenomenally, but we can also perhaps differentiate them simply by duration. Although this is arguable. I would say that if character traits exist, they certainly last longer than moods. But imagine somebody who has chronic depression. That's a pretty long-lasting mood. And perhaps the mood even has an effect on whatever we're calling character traits, right? So who knows? Okay, let's see here. All right, so that's about all I wanted to say about affective dispositions. Next, let's talk about desires. Desires are another kind of propositional attitude. I mentioned beliefs earlier, like if Josh believes that it is raining, that sentence says that I have a propositional attitude of belief towards the proposition it is raining. Same with desires. If I desire to have coffee, that's pretty propositional. So how can we distinguish desires from emotions? Because desires are also not just propositional, but they're also affective, right? What are some features of desires that help us to distinguish them from the emotions? Well, the first thing, oh, excuse me, more coffee. The first way to distinguish between desires and emotions is that some episodic desires are not actually felt, whereas emotions, being episodic also, are always felt. There's always a felt quality to an emotion, I would think. Yeah, we did mention the possibility of unfelt emotions in the first lecture, but let's bracket that for now. So if I have a desire to visit the North Pole, for example, or a better example, Iceland, both lovely cold places which I would like to visit one day. Well, I have a desire to visit Iceland, but it's not like I'm always like, oh boy, I've got to go to Iceland. You know, I'm not always having an episode of desire to visit Iceland or the North Pole. Right? I'm feeling it right now because I'm talking about it, but yesterday I wasn't, right? I wasn't particularly feeling that desire. Yeah, that would be weird. It would be weird if it was just like, oh, I need to go to Iceland, man. You know, that would be strange. But I mean, but that's a great example. I mean, some desires are episodic, but some are felt for long durations too. I'm thinking here of cases of addiction, right? If you're dealing with an addiction and you're experiencing like constant cravings for what you're addicted to, that seems like a desire that's not episodic, but perhaps longer, maybe a desire that's more like a mood. But then again, we don't call those desires. We call them addictions or dependencies, right? So I don't know. Whatever. We're doing ordinary language philosophy here, so we have to talk our way through some things sometimes. But, you know, compare the desire to visit Iceland or the North Pole or Australia to a desire to run to the bathroom because you really have to go. That should really make the difference clear between the way we feel some desires and not others, right? The second way we can distinguish desires from other emotions is that desires are not obviously episodic. Emotions are obviously episodic, right? That's what distinguishes them from moods. But desires are not, as I just said. Really, I've already made this point, I think. Like, if I want to go to the North Pole next year, or Iceland next year, I'm not constantly in a mental episode of desire. So I'm not feeling the desire, but I'm also not in the state of desire. I don't have that, I have that desire, but it's not always activated, I guess we could say. Oh, go ahead with the question about the needing to go to the bathroom example. The point of that example, by the way, is that needing to go to the bathroom is felt, obviously, right? Is it considered an emotion or a desire if it is a physiological need? I don't know. This is tricky to answer for me, because emotions always have a felt quality to them, right? But certain things that we feel are obviously not emotions. The example I used last time was pain, right? Pain is something we feel, but it's not an emotion, right? So that's what I'll say about that for now. A third way, however, that we can differentiate between desires and emotions is that desires always seem to be directed at states of affairs, whereas emotions can be directed at states of affairs, but also people, events, and so on and so forth. This is really highlighted by the discussion from last time too, when we show that we can talk about emotions propositionally or nominally, which the job of that exercise was really just to reveal the range of objects that emotions can have. But desires don't seem to be like that. Desires seem to be about states of affairs. But I don't know. Can't we desire? We can desire people. Romeo and Juliet desire one another, right? So I don't know about that. I'll have to think about that. I think aloud sometimes as I'm lecturing everyone. So just be aware that sometimes I'm talking to myself in an effort to do ordinary language philosophy in front of an audience. So is a drive for success in life considered to be a desire, even if it is near constant? That's a good question. I'm not sure. I also want to make sure. Yeah, is a drive for success in life considered a desire, even if it is near constant? It might perhaps just be a character trait. A drive for success. Rise and grind. Yes. I mean, ambition, is that an emotion, a desire, or a character trait? Or industriousness? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. There are many ways that we could characterize any number of these things. So I'll have to just say for now that I'm not certain, but perhaps I'll form some thoughts on this as we continue through the material. Oh, and this is another key thing right here. Fourthly, another way we can distinguish between emotions and desires is that desires are always about states of affairs which one does not believe currently obtain. If I believe that my partner is already happy, I can't desire that she be happy. She's already happy, right? Or the example in the book, if Sam believes that whatever her name was is dead, she cannot desire that she die because she's already dead, right? So we only desire things, states of affairs that do not currently obtain, right? And related to that, fifthly and finally, desires, at least insofar as they are motivational states, are internally related to your own conviction that you can actually do something to bring about your desire. Or on the flip side, perhaps to a lack of conviction that you can bring about your desire, right? So desire is or can be a motivational state, and it's related to, your ability to actually do something to bring about the desire. Now, emotions can also be motivational states, certainly. And I think this is especially true of basic ones, like fright or disgust. Oh, if you feel frightened, if you feel frightened, one of the things you're going to be motivated to do is to leave the immediate danger you're facing. Try to get away from it. You might, fight or flight. You might try to leave, or you might try to fight. If there's a predator or a violent individual that scares you, you can run away or you can fight. These motivational states are what Lazarus would have called action tendencies, right? Likewise with disgust. If you're feeling disgust, you really want to get away from the disgusting stimulus, right? You want to get away from it. Disgust is great for this because it's so visceral. And we all know what it's like to have a disgust response. And when you smell something rotten or see something grotesque, you plug your nose, you look away, you want to get the heck out of there, right? But emotions are not always motivational like this. Emotional experiences of a past event are one good illustration of this, right? If I'm having an emotional experience because of the past, it doesn't really make sense to talk about that in terms of motivation. Of course, some people might think about past events and experience emotions like regret, but we would not say that that we desire to change a past event that we regret, because desires are about states which we think we can actually do something about, and we can't do anything about the past. That is why we say, I wish I never said that to so-and-so, or I wish I never stole that car. We don't say, I desire that I never stole that car, because you can't hop into a time machine and change the past. Wishing seems to imply that it's out of our hands, whereas desire, it's in our hands, right? Okay, I'm just going to read these next passages because they are a nice little summary of what the authors have discussed thus far. Oh my goodness, excuse me. On page 10, they write, at this stage, it already looks like desires differ significantly from emotions. Unlike emotions, desires are not always felt and often seem to be dispositions rather than episodes. Their respective intentional features also display interesting disanalogies. Desires appear to be essentially directed towards states of affairs that are not believed to obtain, and seem to exhibit an essential link with the subject's awareness of a possibility to act. Some of these distinctions, they say, between desire and emotions might be superficial, but they continue. The difference between desires and other cognitive phenomena on the one hand and emotions on the other hand is arguably situated at a more fundamental level that also concerns their respective intentionality, right? So intentionality is something that really helps us differentiate between desires and other cognitive phenomena. And a cognitive phenomena, conative comes from the Latin cognitus, a blind striving. Think of willing, doing, the urge to act, motivation. These are conative phenomena. Okay, so what they're saying here is that it's the intentional features of desires and emotions which really differentiate them on a fundamental level. So some differences and similarities between desires and emotions may seem superficial, but if you look fundamentally at their respective intentional characteristics, that is what really differentiates them. And that gets us to this idea of direction of fit. Once again, this is how they sort of make this clear for us. We learned last time that emotions have a mind to world direction of fit. And in this way, emotions are like beliefs or perceptions. There are facts we can check out there in the world. We can see how the world is and see if our beliefs or perceptions fit those facts. Beliefs and perceptions are, of course, in the mind. So something from the mind, beliefs, perceptions, seeing if it fits the world, mind to world direction of fit. Desires and other cognitive states actually have the reverse direction of fit. They have a world to mind direction of fit. Deonna and Teroni state on page 10, they say, this is to say, that desires have a world to mind direction of fit. This is to say, the point of a desire is to bring about changes in the world so that the world comes to be as it is represented by the desire. And when this happens, or in a stronger version of the idea, when the desire of the agent causes an action that brings about these changes, the desire is satisfied or fulfilled. So desires have a different direction of fit than emotions. They have a world to mind direction of fit rather than mind to world. And we also don't talk about emotions as being fulfilled, right? Like if I'm afraid, I don't talk of my fear or my sense of fear having been fulfilled the way I talk about a desire or a wish being fulfilled. We talk about emotions as being correct or justified, right? Do they meet those mind to world standards of correctness? Do I have some justification for feeling the emotion? But we talk about emotions that way, but we don't talk about emotions as being fulfilled or unfulfilled, right? That's something we do with desires. So just to kind of recap all of this, the authors state on page 11, when they're wrapping up, we assess emotions rather along the same lines as the way we assess beliefs or perceptions. They are correct or incorrect depending on whether things actually stand or stood or will stand as they are represented by the belief or the perception. That is to say, emotions have the opposite mind to world direction of fit. Desires may, of course, still have correctness conditions, like a mind to world direction of fit, in addition to fulfillment conditions, which is a world to mind direction of fit. But the fact that they have the latter sets them clearly apart from emotions and other affective phenomena. So they're not saying that emotions are mind to world and desires are only world to mind. Desires may have correctness conditions such that they also have a mind to world direction of fit, but desires and other cognitive states have a world to mind direction of fit that emotions and beliefs and perceptions do not have. I realize that probably sounds a little wordy and confusing, but can I explain the world to mind again? Yes, I can. Now I'll just go back to the previous slide, if I can. So a mind to world direction of fit is where we can evaluate whatever mental representation we have of belief or a desire, or perhaps even perception, by whether what is in the mind fits the world, right? So that is to say there are standards of correctness for my belief. If I believe that it is raining, well, there's a standard of correctness. Is it actually raining? And I can seek some justification for my belief by looking out the window, seeing if it is actually raining. Then I have some justification for my true belief. So I'm making what's in my head fit the world. But world to mind direction of fit for desires, in the case of desires, these are what we would call fulfillment conditions rather than correctness conditions. We want to make the world like what is represented in the mind. So I have a desire to bring about P, so I do P, and I have fulfilled my desire that P, because I've made the world to be the way I desire it to be. So that's what that means. So does that answer your question, Cameron? I hope it does. I realize this can be a little confusing, but that's why I've placed this quote here. Okay, great. Thanks. That's good to hear. The quotes, by the way, from the text that I placed in the slides, those are things that I think are probably deserving of 1 or 2 reads. So, okay, good. I'm glad that's clear. I'm glad everyone finds that helpful. So yeah, if I quote long passages, it's always a good idea to reread them. Now we're nearly finished. I think we can wrap up very quickly. Just to summarize everything so far. Now that we have covered the first chapter, we are well equipped to distinguish emotions from other psychological and affective states. That's great. And we do this, of course, by paying attention to the phenomenality of emotions, the intentionality and the epistemology of the emotions, and how their unique phenomenal, intentional, and epistemological characteristics can differentiate them from other psychological states, such as beliefs and desires. We can also differentiate between the emotions and other affective states like mood by paying attention to these characteristics. And we can make further distinctions like we've done today by paying attention to these things. And that allows us to differentiate between, episodes of emotion or emotional experiences and other things like emotional dispositions, sentiments, desires, character traits. So with all that said, just what the heck are the emotions anyway? What do Deonna and Teroni have to say about that? On page 11, they provide a nice little working definition for us to use as we move along throughout the book. They write, emotions are episodes that have a felt character, phenomenology, and are directed at particular objects, intentionality, provided by their cognitive bases, also intentionality. They appear, moreover, to be intimately related to evaluations of these objects and are subject to assessment by means of a variety of distinct standards, most prominently among them, standards of correctness and justification. And there's our epistemology part right there. But none of this is written in stone, right? All of this is up for debate. And we will return to a lot of the things that we've discussed in chapter 1 here as we make our way through the rest of the book. Now, for next time, I would like to tackle chapter 2, of course, the diversity and unity of emotions. And I think next week I'll take a similar approach to that of this week. What I mean by that is that I will cover roughly the first half of chapter 2 on Tuesday, and then on Thursday's lecture, we'll wrap up and cover chapter 1, or chapter 2, the second half of chapter 2. My goodness, I'm getting tired. Oh, right. Oh, no, that's okay. Chelsea, you have a question? I think I can try and answer it. It's a pretty long question that relates to disgust and the motivational state of emotions. It's up to you if you want to email me. You're welcome, everybody, by the way. We're all done for the day, so if you want to get out of here, that's okay. But Chelsea, if you want to ask me that question here, I can keep it going. And then the answer is there on YouTube in the re-upload of the lecture. Cameron also has a quick question. Yes, I'm getting multiple questions here. Let me just get out of this slideshow. Let's see. Okay, Cameron says Chelsea can go first if you wish.
So I might, if you can you hear me again?
I can,
I don't
yes.
know. Okay, because it wasn't really working before. So I was thinking about how you were talking about disgust not necessarily being a motivational thing when you think about something in the past. And because it's like something you can't go back to that, right?
Oh, I think I know what you're going to
You
say,
would have
but
wishes there instead.
Perhaps. Well, maybe disgust
Okay.
maybe disgust is a bad example for this. Like, disgust is a good example of an emotion that is very motivational. But I suppose if you had a memory of a disgusting event, okay, I'm thinking of an example that it's not really my example to give, but I heard this from Professor Milopoulos at Carleton University in a class I was taking with her back in the day.
Okay.
And she relayed that when she was young, she had eaten pineapple and became ill. And of course,
Okay.
ever since then, pineapple's been disgusting, right?
Mm.
So I suppose in that way, maybe there's some motivational things about past experiences, but anyway, go on, continue with your question.
Okay, well, yeah, so that's pretty much where I was going with that. So
Oh,
I
sorry.
was thinking, no, it makes, no, it's good that you were able to take it there, because it means that I kind of talked about it in the way that I needed to. I was gonna draw anxiety into it too, because I was thinking about like a reflective kind of a feeling of, because this is again where we talk about like we want to be changing something about the world, right? And anxiety, I think of worry, when you know, what is it, like desire, you can only feel this desire when it is the case that it's not the case at the present time. And sometimes it could be the case that something is actually happening, or somebody is actually happy, but you still have
Right.
you still experience anxiety about whether or not they are. So then I got to thinking about this. So, like, could it be possible then that, I guess it brings it back to cringe again. This is so weird. I literally don't talk, I never talk about this. But it's like the motivation to say you've been, maybe really assertive, like overly assertive in a social situation in the past, and you think about it and it makes you feel like, oh God, I never want to do that again. I have the
Yeah.
desire to never behave myself in this way.
Yeah. So I suppose we can, yeah. So when
But
I
like
guess,
you're not, but like in the moment, not feeling that disgust, like only reflectively feeling it.
yeah, I mean, that disgust or that cringe maybe has
Yeah.
made such an impression on you that I would say that you are resolved. Like you can desire not to cause someone to feel cringe or to embarrass yourself, or I guess
Right.
like earlier when I said like desire is always about making the world like bringing about a state of affairs that is not yet the case, but that can also
Mhm.
mean that something is the case and you want that to not be the case, and like,
Right,
right?
right.
So
Okay. So like
and I know
something not
that's
necessarily the case in the present moment, but it has been the case in the past, and so it is kind of the case now because it hasn't been at one point
or
the case.
perhaps you may just have a fear or a
Right.
not like not like fear, but like a worry that
Yeah.
you might do something silly.
Right.
Yeah, and we do
Okay.
this all the time. I mean, I dare people to go back in time and look at like their very first Facebook posts. It's pure cringe. Like you can't
Right.
do it. So
Right.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's really cool. Oh my gosh, my brain. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad I could help. Sometimes I'm not sure. I have to kind of go full Socrates sometimes and admit when I don't know, but
No,
these discussions
it's
can be helpful.
fantastic.
Yeah, for it's good for
Especially
fleshing
when
things out.
when we think about the character traits, right? Like when we think about how over time, how consistently our own self-reflection can play into how we are behaving ourselves. And then if that changes over time, our character traits change. Like, oh my God, well,
It's
I have so
true.
much to write. I
Yeah,
have
it's
nothing
true.
nothing to say really yet. Just so many questions to write down.
Oh, that's okay. Write down questions, notes, and those are great for the basis of critical responses, essays, stuff in this class, stuff in other classes you may be taking. Tie it all
Yeah.
together, especially if you're thinking of, if you're thinking about doing like this is really good for coming up for ideas for like your honors thesis or something, right? So,
Yeah,
you know,
yes, yeah.
yeah.
Sadly enough, I'm not in philosophy as my major, which makes me very sad, but
Is it
we'll
psychology?
see. It is psychology,
Oh,
sadly
that's fine.
enough.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't know, we'll see.
you can
I'm
do
trying to
both.
figure out how to marry the two.
Yeah. Oh, well, cognitive science is
Yeah.
just say you're doing a cognitive science kind of thing. There you go.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, I'll
And
let Cameron ask the question that they had. Thank
okay,
you so
great.
much.
No problem. Cameron, go ahead if you're still there. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Is my mic okay?
It's a little choppy.
Sir, can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's just a little choppy, but I can hear you.
Is it better now?
Oh yeah, that's much better. Yeah.
All right. So I just wanted to go more in depth with the mind to world and world to mind. So what I originally said, if you believe it's raining, you have to justify it by actually looking outside and seeing it's raining. Correct?
That's
Can you
right.
give like more of a similar example for world to mind?
For world to mind would be like if I desire to go outside, which is simple. Simple example. I desire to go outside, but I'm inside, right? So I want to make the world such that it is the way that my desire is representing the world. So I want to be outside. That's my desire. So I just get up and go outside. And now I'm outside, and now the world is such that it's the way that it is represented in my desire, right? So when we talk about world to mind with desires and other kinds of conative states, a desire, Chelsea's got a good idea here, which I'll touch on in a moment. So there's if I desire to go outside, I have to do something to make the world such that it aligns, it fulfills my desire. And that is world to mind, right? Because I'm doing something to the world to make it the case that the world is like what is represented in my mind. Does that make sense?
All right, yeah. So it helps. I use the example like we do things in reality to
Sorry, I think
fulfill our thoughts in our mind. So that's like where the from. Oh, I said we do things in reality to fulfill our mind's thoughts. Like mind. Is that?
Yeah,
I'm just gonna ask it.
Okay. In the meantime, while Cameron's typing that, I'll answer your question, Chelsea. What about like I desire for it to not be raining? Well, I would say that's a wish. Because remember, desire implies that we have a conviction that we can actually bring about the state of affairs that we desire. And of course, none of us can stop the rain, right? Isn't there a song that goes like that? Creedence Clearwater Revival, maybe. I don't know. But I would say that that is a wish, because a wish, when we talk about wishes, we're talking about things that we cannot do ourselves, right? That is why, the genie of the lamp grants 3 wishes, right? He's a genie. He's magical. Aladdin cannot bring about the state of affairs on his own. I'm sorry for the Disney example, but yeah. An analysis available for those who may believe they can. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe some people believe. I mean, there is also like magical thinking, and on magical thinking, people believe that their thoughts actually can affect the universe. I talk about this in my philosophy of the paranormal class. But it's like, the power of consciousness, the law of attraction, the secret, all that. Like, just wish, have a manifestation board, put all the stuff you desire on it, and the universe will make it happen. This is those people might say those are desires. I would say they're wishes, because none of that works. Oh, well, good news. It's all on YouTube. There are 2 iterations of that class on my YouTube channel. I'll drop a link in the Discord server. Cameron, are you still here? I hope I haven't lost your question in the chat. But I remember. Okay, yeah, no problem, Chelsea. Cameron's question, though, what was it again? Mind to world. Well, you were saying, Cameron, if you're still there, maybe just let me know you're still there. Ah, here it is. Okay, thanks, Cameron. Is my description correct? We do things in reality to fulfill our thoughts in our mind. That would be world to mind, yes. And mind to world is we have thoughts that we use reality to justify. I would say yes, you've got the basic gist of it there. It's like when something is mind to world, what's in the mind, in order to be correct or justified, we find that justification in the world. Evidence for our beliefs, for example. So mind to world is always like the representations in here and the justification or standard of correctness is somewhere out in the world. But with a desire and other cognitive states, it's the other way around. We have a desire, you know, I have a desire to eat an apple, perhaps, but the world is not like that. You know, I don't have an apple in my hand and I'm not eating it. So I have to make the world align with my desire. That's why it's world to mind. Go to the fridge, grab an apple, eat it. Now the world is in accordance with what I desire, and I cease to desire my delicious apple. Does that answer your question, Cameron? Okay, great. Again, read over these passages in the book, perhaps once or twice if they're not clear, and this will help kind of shore everything up. It's always good to read after the lecture too, reread the passages after the lecture. That helps too. Sometimes it just clicks, you know? All right, so it's about that time. I desire dinner. And the desire combined with my belief that dinner is in the kitchen is causing me to want to leave and go make dinner and eat it. So there's a little propositional attitude psychology for y'all. Oh, no worries, Cameron. It's great. It's better to ask questions if you're not sure. And welcome to your first philosophy class, by the way. I hope you settle in and you like it. Philosophy's fun, but it's tricky if you haven't done it before. So don't worry, pick my brain anytime if you have any questions, Cameron. I'll say goodnight to the two of you, and I will see you next time. Networking. Oh, like computers. I like computers. Those are cool. Yeah, computers. I have a friend who's in computers. He does cybersecurity, and he's always trying to get me to learn computer programming. I'd love to, but I don't have the time. All right, bye, everyone. Have a good night, guys, and I'll see you next time.